I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On tonight's episode, we will discuss the Florida Georgia game. We'll open talking about the Florida offense going against the Georgia defense. In 4 bits, we will go with the Gators defense versus the Georgia offense. Reluctantly, will. Transfer season is upon us for 6 bits, and Florida lands another commit with a major announcement on the way later this week. Hopefully, he'll give us some good news heading into Georgia here, Will. Hey, Will, the Bulldogs, let's just jump right into 2 bits here. Florida, Georgia set the square off along the banks of the St. Johns River this weekend at the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Sticking with that name, that's the name forever. The number one dogs are expected to handle the Gators on Saturday. We're looking at a 22-point spread, which is the largest dating back to 1995. No moral victories in the SEC, Will. But what's a good day for the office look like? What's a good day at the office look like for the Gators here? And let's start talking about the Florida offense versus the Georgia defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think Florida's going to have to play a game where they don't turn the ball over. I think they have to play a game where they put the ball in the end zone rather than settle for field goals. I think they're probably going to have to get a bunch of explosive plays, which luckily is one of their hallmarks. I think they're going to have to convert third downs at a pretty high rate as well, and potentially run the ball, which good news is that's a strength, right? Florida ranks fourth in the country at 6 yards per rush. They're going to have to run the ball, control the clock, keep Georgia's offense off the field, really shrink this game down, very similar to what they tried to do against Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
where you go for it on fourth downs, even your own territory. You take 2 points when you have the opportunity to. You do all those little things to try to gain an edge. And, whether it's enough or not, I think is going to be an open question. But you're going to have to play this game in a way that you wouldn't if you had more confidence in the other unit. Florida's offense versus Georgia's defense. Georgia's a top 10 defense in the country. They're not as good as last year, but they still have a negative PPA, which is really, really, really good for defenses. And 10th overall in yards per play, 26th against the rush, third against the pass. And maybe that's, again, a little bit of an edge for Florida from the standpoint of Florida's more of a run heavy team, but it's still uphill sledding, even for Florida's stronger unit in this game. And so, again, I think if you get out of it with zero turnovers, I think if Anthony Richardson has a big day, I think if you hit some explosives and you don't settle for field goals, but get touchdowns when you're in the red zone, I think that'll end up being a successful day. I don't know if it'll be enough, but I think it'll be a successful day where the offense at least keeps Florida in the game.
This Georgia unit, one of the stingiest defenses in the SEC, allowing an average of 247 total yards a game, 163 through the air, 83 rushing. Opponents scoring 9.1 points per game. So we're under 10 points a game again this season for Georgia. I was surprised, Will, only 7 sacks on the season, was just 14th in the SEC. So maybe Anthony Richardson will have a little time to pass back there. 6 interceptions, forced 3 fumble recoveries for the dogs. Georgia will also be potentially without one of their best prospects, defensive tackle Jalen Carter, who's been dealing with an MCL injury since the Missouri game.
Yeah, well, and outside of the opener against Oregon, they really haven't played anybody either. I mean, you look at their schedule: Vanderbilt, Auburn, Missouri, Kent State, South Carolina, and Samford. Obviously, South Carolina maybe looks a little bit better than we thought at the time there, but I mean, they've beaten those teams, but even the Missouri game, 26-22, was a game they had to come back late. That was when we were all up late, sort of, I was avoiding writing an article while watching it, rooting for rooting for Georgia to choke, and they didn't do it. So hey, maybe we get one of those. That is one where they were on the road, 26-22. South Carolina, they went convincingly on the road. Obviously, the neutral game against Oregon on the road. Here, it's a neutral site game against Florida. Does that make a difference? I have no idea, but yeah, I mean, you rattled off all those stats. I think the big thing for me is only 11.5% of their overall plays, of their 390 plays, have gone for 10 plus yards. If you look at, or I'm sorry, only 15% of their overall plays have gone for 10 plus yards. They don't give up a ton of explosive plays. 2.3% of their total plays have gone for 20 plus yards. It's just, they don't give up a lot. They keep things in front. There's going to be a lot of third downs. You're going to have to convert third downs. The good news is Florida's actually pretty good in that respect and really, really explosive. I mean, you look at them, they've got 3 plays of 70 plus yards. They've got 5 plays of 60 plus yards, 7 of 50 plus yards, 12 of 40 plus yards. So if they can hit 3, 4, 5 of those 40 plus play varieties, all of a sudden you're putting up 28, 35 points if you can get the ball in the end zone, just on the nature of those plays. Now, we've talked all year about Florida being very, very inconsistent. And this is one of those where if the inconsistent Anthony Richardson shows up, if the inconsistent blocking shows up, they're not going to average a ton of yards per play overall unless they supplement things with big plays. And so that's the thing to look for, is the explosives. If they can hit the explosives, it'll be similar to 2020, where you hit a couple of those wheel routes down the sideline, all of a sudden things start to open up. Georgia, it's almost like Drago. Drago goes bleeding when he finally gets hit by Rocky, and all of a sudden you start to show some confidence. This is going to be an interesting one for me. Again, because Anthony Richardson struggled so much last year, I think it's important for him to at least show the progress that we've seen from last year in his first start to now. So if he goes out there and lays an egg similar to the way he did against Kentucky or USF or even against Missouri, I think now you start to get a little bit concerned. That's 2 years in a row against an elite defense that he's really, really struggled. Instead, if he comes out, plays a solid game, doesn't turn the ball over a ton, converts in the red zone, and maybe even does a couple of magical things, you come out of this game, regardless of the outcome, feeling very good about where Florida is at the quarterback position.
Ivan Drago, 5-star prospect out of the Soviet Union. Hey, look, Richardson, one of the interesting comments that I've heard Kirby Smart talk about this week with Anthony Richardson, he said the big run plays often come when he's dropping back to pass it, he's just making a play, not necessarily in the called run plays department. Obviously, we don't call a ton of run plays for Richardson under Napier here, but I did find that comment interesting from Smart, because you look at, like I talked about, the sack numbers, probably going to indicate what the approach is going to be with the defense there, where maybe they're not going to be rushing so hard upfield, and it's going to be more about containing Richardson and forcing him to sit back there, analyze, and make the passes.
Yeah, it also tells you what they're going to do in coverage, right? It's a whole lot easier to not allow those big plays to a scrambling quarterback if you're playing zone, as opposed to if you're playing man-to-man. If you're playing man-to-man, your back's to the quarterback. You're not looking at his eyes. You're not looking into the backfield. And if he decides to take off, things are open. So if you think of that 4th and 2 where Richardson ran against Missouri all the way down to, I think, the 1-yard line, that was something where Missouri was in man-to-man coverage, and all of a sudden things open up over the middle. You can say the same thing about the run against Utah. You can say the same thing last week about the run against LSU. Now, in some ways, it doesn't really matter because he can still split the zone, because when Richardson gets going, he takes sort of these short, choppy steps that don't necessarily look incredibly fast, and then he just races by people. And I do wonder whether that causes some of the defenders to take bad angles. He's going to get a couple, I would imagine, because he's going to get flushed. There are going to be times where he goes back where there just isn't anybody open, and he's going to have to do it. He's going to have to do something. But that's going to be the question, is does it end up being a 12-yard gain for a first down, or can he convert it into a 40 or a 50-yard gain that flips the field, gives Florida's defense a breather, and then eventually either turns into a touchdown on that play or turns into a touchdown at some point along the way?
Yeah, the thing I really worry about with the offense, and we'll get into it in 4 bits here, because the game is connected, unfortunately, with this defense here. But Richardson, as long as we can stay within a score, you look for him to maybe stay patient. You're looking to avoid the big mistake, flip the ball away on 3rd down rather than force it in somewhere. I think of all people, Anthony Richardson will understand how quickly Georgia can turn on a dime and turn it on, like we saw at the end of the first half last year, Will. So you look for maybe some dink and dunk conservative plays out of Florida early on, where you're looking for long, sustained drives against the Dogs if things are going well for the Gators offense.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because if you think about him this year, I mean, against Kentucky, the interceptions came when Florida was ahead, right? He could have packed it in and checked it down and probably allowed the Gators to win that game. But he was aggressive and he started throwing interceptions there. Same thing against USF. Florida was ahead. They'd gotten the pick 6 by Kimber, and all of a sudden those interceptions start coming. The interception against Tennessee comes late in the game. The interception against Eastern Washington comes when they're way up. So a lot of those turnovers have occurred when Florida has been in a reasonable position, or at the end of the game when he's doing something out of desperation. It hasn't been like he's getting frustrated, Florida's falling behind, and he's throwing the ball into all sorts of coverage. So I'm not real concerned about that. What I'm concerned about is that Kirby Smart runs about the most complicated defense you're going to see in college football. And you could see that last year when Richardson was in there. They ran a bunch of things like Patrick Toney likes running, where simulated pressures and different things like that, where they had linemen dropping into throwing lanes and those sorts of things. And then obviously the pick six to Kobe Dean. Great play by Dean, but we saw that again against Kentucky this year. So Richardson is capable of putting that ball out there in a place where it's dangerous. Look, the game was actually pretty close last year until the Anthony Richardson turnovers there at the end of the first half just essentially put a nail in the coffin. And those sorts of things, it's not going to be able to snowball. And that's maybe the one thing, right? Smart's going to get him probably at some point. There's going to be something that he does that confuses him. And then the question is going to be, does he throw the ball even though he's confused? Does he hold on to it and take a sack? Does he scramble out of the way and make a big play out of it when he's not entirely sure what's going on? And then if he does make a mistake, is he able to prevent it from snowballing into a second mistake and a third mistake and a fourth mistake? Those will sort of be the things I think that are going to determine this game. Again, we were all nervous heading into that Tennessee game, wondering what were we going to get after the USF and Kentucky debacles. He goes out, throws for 450 yards. So it's not as though he's not capable, but he's been very up and very down. And that's one of the things I think you look at a guy like Stetson Bennett on the other side that we'll talk about. He's much more consistent, but doesn't have the same ceiling, but has a significantly higher floor. Richardson has a higher ceiling. Richardson can be the best quarterback on the field on Saturday. But Stetson Bennett is more likely to be the best quarterback on the field on Saturday. And I think that's sort of the difference. And Florida's going to have Anthony Richardson be the best player on the field on Saturday in order for them to win.
I think it's a given that the running game has to succeed for the Gators to have real success on Saturday. Feed 2, feed 7, Johnson, ETN. That's a big part of the game plan this year anyway. In the passing game, though, what do you want to see step up on Saturday? What in the perfect world would happen? Which receiver would jump out to you on Saturday? Would we get the tight end a little more involved? Maybe a shot, keep going deep to shorter, at least one or two shots a game. What do you want to see on Saturday?
No, I think the critical ones are going to be Pearsall over the middle. I mean, if you're playing coverage, right? If you end up playing essentially cover 2 and you're playing coverage, and you're playing a lot of zone, there's going to be holes in the zone. And you send a guy deep when there's zone coverage, there's going to be a safety over the top, and you don't necessarily want to be throwing it there. So what's going to be open are the intermediate routes that are sitting there over the linebacker and under the safety. Those are throws that Richardson has sometimes hit and sometimes missed. And so Pearsall is the guy who's been running those plays. Pearsall has been open many times on those things. Sometimes he gets hit, sometimes he doesn't. And so if Pearsall goes for 120, 130 yards in this game, I think Florida is going to have a successful offensive day. If Pearsall's open 3 or 4 times and gets airmailed, I'm not sure Georgia's going to miss it. Like I think there might even be some times where they play zone and actually have their safety stay a little bit deep and try to maybe disguise that they're in a cover 3 versus a cover 2, get Richardson to throw over the middle where you've got a safety sitting there waiting for the overthrow. And that's something where if you see a safety catch it, get an interception off of an overthrow, chances are Richardson got baited into throwing into a place that you didn't necessarily want him throwing. So that's the thing. I mean, you're going to have to hit Pearsall over the middle in order to loosen that stuff up, right? You want to force Georgia to go into a single high safety look as opposed to having 2 deep safeties if you're going to have to win this game with Richardson throwing the ball. And there are 2 ways to do that. The first way you do it is you just run the ball down their throat. You don't stop until they bring up another safety to stop it. The other way to do it is you throw over the middle and make them pay for playing with the middle of the field open and put it in there on Pearsall. So those are sort of the 2 things I guess I'd probably be looking for.
Yeah. Key plays. Let's keep the turnovers to a minimum. Obviously that goes without saying, but some of those, boy, that makes me nervous, Will, when you describe it like that, because that's where Anthony's kind of missed on this year. Those high throws, we really haven't seen him pay the price for those high throws over the middle. Those have mostly been incompletions this year. So I feel like Georgia is a defense that could make you pay for that. Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball here and look at the Gators defense. First, the Georgia offense, the Dogs offense, second in the SEC, behind Tennessee, 526 yards a game, 41.7 points per outing. The passing attack goes for 329 yards per game and just shy of 200 on the ground. You have a 4-man rotation in the backfield there between Edwards, Milton, McIntosh, and Robinson. They've all had 39 carries or more on the season. McConkey and McIntosh lead the team in receptions, but you mentioned it earlier, Georgia's best weapons, the thing that really gives the Georgia offense an identity. the two tight ends. I'm going to call him a future All-Pro. Brock Bowers and 6'7" monster Darnell Washington have combined for 42 receptions and 678 yards on the year.
Yeah, I mean the tight ends are an enormous mismatch for Georgia.
Everyone for against anyone, right?
Well, against anyone, but especially in this game. I mean, if you think
Yeah.
about the tight ends and what they did from Utah, right? I mean, Utah, those guys, but
you're worried about our linebackers and coverage?
A little bit, maybe. But think about it, right? We went into that Utah game, and one of the things that made me think Florida might be able to pull out that game was that Utah was very methodical in terms of hitting those linebackers, but they weren't explosive. Mm-hmm. Bowers is averaging 15.1 yards per reception. Darnell Washington's averaging 17.8. So, the reality is they got two tight ends, each of whom can kill you. And both of those guys are going to be mismatch nightmares for Florida. So, Ben Troop was on Gators Breakdown last night, and I asked him, what do you need to do? He said, jam them. You got to get your hands on them. So, again, if you're looking for good signs from the Florida defense, I want to see a linebacker get a pass interference. Like, be close enough to the guy and have your hands on him, be grabbing him, make the officials call it. They're not going to call it 14 straight times. Get your hands on him and don't let him go away. And hey, look, we're going to get a pass interference or two. I think that's okay. You can't just let him roam free down the center of the field. So that's the first thing. I mean, you mentioned that Georgia is second in the SEC in yards. They're actually second overall in the country in yards per play. So they're more efficient than Tennessee. Florida 112th in yards per play overall. It's an enormous mismatch on that side of the ball. Georgia has converted 138 of their 509 plays on offense this year. So that's 27% have gone for more than 10 yards. That's a problem. And then Florida,
this is the part of the day where you just have to be a little emotionally dead inside, compartmentalize a little bit.
So the Florida defense, 122 of their 504 plays they've faced have gone for 10 plus yards. Oh. So this really is like Swiss cheese, just full meeting the cheese grater, man. So put it this way: Florida's given up 30 points per game against FBS opponents. Georgia's scored 43.2. So you mentioned that Georgia's giving up 10 points a game. They're 10.7 in FBS games. Florida's giving up 30. This on paper, statistically, this one isn't even close. It really isn't. And there's a reason why Georgia's favored by like 23 points now. It keeps going up. It was 20 when it started, and people keep betting the lineup because nobody's taking the Gators to come anywhere close, right? They're all taking this to be a blowout. Now, I think Napier has a history of keeping these sorts of games closer. And so you sort of lean on that and say, okay, how's he going to do that? I think, my main criticism in the Mullen era, somewhat tongue in cheek, but sometimes it was realistic, is that I thought Kirby Smart sometimes got too conservative in some of these instances. I think you can say that again about that Missouri game. I think there were some opportunities there early in that game to sort of take hold of it, and he didn't do it. And geez, he had Bowers and Washington who all of a sudden start dominating in the fourth quarter. Where were they the first three? And so those are the things that I think you're going to have to get some favors. They're going to have to turn the ball over, that you're going to have to block a punt. You're going to have to, maybe even get a turnover that turns into a touchdown. So some sort of pick six, or a fumble or a bad snap on a punt, or, assuming that they punt. Those are the types of things that you're going to have in order to win this. And again, I go back to what I said at the Tennessee and LSU games is if Napier really wants to embrace his fourth down strategy, I think it would be wise to think about a couple of onside kicks.
I think for it at this point, when you're looking at the defense when you're looking at that performance against LSU and Tennessee, I went through and wrote an article last week, and I did a percentage of yardage gain where the start of the drive to the end zone, right? And against Tennessee and LSU, the defense gave up 86% of the possible yardage they could have given up throughout the entire game. 86%. So they don't show up. They're only giving up 14% more yardage there. That's a crazy stat right there. That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild to look at. And you look at how effective we made. And now, granted, credit to LSU and Jaden Daniels. They went out and followed that up with a nice performance there against Ole Miss on Saturday. So made me feel slightly better about the Florida defense. But man, Will, it's tough to sell much optimism with this matchup here with the Dogs, Will.
Well, so here's what I'll say is that Georgia absolutely shut down Oregon's offense. And
Heisman contender Bo Nix.
yeah, well, hey, I'm the one who had him in the playoff in our preseason magazine. But
yes, you did, and we will remember that too.
But don't worry, I'll give you plenty of crap about that if they end up making it, because you mocked me mercilessly
and I
for the
will
fact that they
continue
were
to
the
mock
fact
you. Yes,
that's all right. How's Will Rogers doing, by the way?
coming around. He's warming up.
Sure he is. So Oregon has the exact same defensive statistics as Florida. You look at predicted points added; they're both at .224 overall, which is really bad. But I think that Anthony Richardson's ceiling is higher than Bo Nix's ceiling, especially when we already know now how Bo Nix played. So again, this could get really, really, really ugly if Anthony Richardson doesn't play well. But if Anthony Richardson plays well, the defensive performance that Oregon put up is probably the defensive performance that you should expect from Florida. That's not good. That's not good at all. But I mean, and some of it in terms of the total points scored and things like that is that there were backup quarterbacks. It's 49-3. It was 28-3 at the half. It was ugly, and it was over really, really quickly. But it was over because Oregon turned the ball over. Nix threw an interception. It was over because Oregon couldn't score. And, look, I think this is one where if you think Florida's going to keep it close, or you think Florida is going to win the game, you need to take the over. Because I don't care I don't even know what the over under is in this one, but you need to take the over, because Florida ain't going to win this game 17-14. I just don't think that's possible.
I don't know if it's possible to win any game 17-14 this year.
Well, that may be true, but they're not winning this one 17-14. That's absolutely. I don't think they have the ability to stop them. I think you're going to see exactly what happened against Oregon. There are going to be drives where Georgia just looks like a complete buzzsaw. And then there are going to be drives where they forget they have Brock Bowers. And when they forget they have Brock Bowers, you have to get them off the field. And so third down conversions, which Florida's been terrible at all year long, they're going to have a game where Georgia goes 3 of 13 or 4 of 12 or something like that. Something below, it's got to be below 50%, probably got to be below 30% to keep them in the game. Georgia is not an offensive juggernaut in the same way that, say, Tennessee is, I don't believe. I think they have physical advantages in a lot of different places, but I also think that there are times where they look pedestrian. And the question is going to be, when they look pedestrian, is Florida going to be able to get off the field? Against Tennessee, they were never able to do it. Against LSU, they gave them easy first downs. We'll see what adjustments they've made coming out of the bye week. I had sort of suggested that the thing they needed to do is find their identity and just decide, play one coverage and just say, look, Stetson Bennett, we're going to play cover 3. That's all we're going to play. If you can pick us apart and go all the way down the field and 75 yards and 12 plays and just dink and dunk your whole way down the field. All right, fine. But we're not going to switch out of this, because this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do well. We're not going to give you a touchdown because we screwed up a coverage, because one guy thought we were in man and another guy thought we were in zone. Like, play the same thing the whole way down and just do it that way and see. And I do think they're going to make some of those adjustments. I think, if it was me, I'd probably pull one of the linebackers out and just say, screw it, I'm going to play an extra DB, because I need somebody on those tight ends who's a DB. And hey, if Georgia runs the ball, that's probably a win, right? They're giving the offense time to rest. And they're not putting up an immediate touchdown. So I think there are probably some things you can do there. You're going to get torched at some point if you just run the same defense over and over and over again against a good team. But Florida's getting torched when they're switching all over the place. And so I am curious to see whether they have really worked on a base concept, that they go out there with a base with a few modifications off of that, just to give the defense some confidence early on.
Odds are that give me a percentage chance that Georgia is scoring more than 30.
95.
40.
80.
50.
That's like 15. I think if they're
I'm worried we might be looking at a 50 burger. That's why I'm saying it, Will.
If they're up in the 49 point range, I think they're going to pull off the dogs. One of the interesting things is that Napier and Kirby Smart very much seem to have a lot of respect for each other. This does not seem like the Spurrier thing where he just loved digging at Georgia And Mullen and Smart clearly had a little bit of animus for each other. I don't think, at least we haven't seen thus far, that between Smart and Napier. And so I do suspect that he's not going to sit there and try and turn the knife. If it's 49-7, I don't think he's going to put in a touchdown to make it 56 late in the game. I think he'll run the ball. And the problem is that he might not. He might run the ball and it might turn into a 50-yard gain, and and then he's got to take the points. But I think Florida's going to give a better showing than most people think. I really do. I think that there's. I don't have a lot of hope for the defensive side of the ball, but I have a lot of hope on the offensive side of the ball. And I wouldn't have said that about Oregon. I would have said if their defense is bad, I don't think Bo Nix is good enough to hold up against a high quality defense. And I think Anthony Richardson, I don't know whether he's good enough to hold up against a high quality defense. And that's really what the test is going to be in this one. So you sort of asked to start, what is a good showing for Florida looks like? Obviously a win, but I think, if they're in it in the fourth quarter, it's a close game. They're making Georgia sweat. It's going to be an enjoyable game for all of us fans who are there watching it. If Georgia turns the ball over a couple of times, maybe you get the win. And if Georgia doesn't turn over the ball, they're the number one team in the country. And if you're the number one team in the country and you don't turn the ball over, you almost never lose. And so, that's going to be the key. Florida's going to have to get maybe 3 turnovers in order to secure a win in this one. And they're going to have to play perfect. And, that's just the reality when you're a 4-3 team.
Just 3 turnovers and play perfect. Come on. Let's go. Are you giving the pep talk on Saturday?
Nah, I'm going to leave that to Troop. He gave one last night where I was about to run through the wall. So
okay, good. Ben Troop, check him out on Gators Breakdown up on on all platforms. Man, Gator Dave's got that covered. Kirby Smart has a chance. You mentioned Napier, Smart. They go back. They got Alabama ties. They know each other from the Saban staff. You got to think maybe he's not going to run up the score in Spurrier-like fashion, but is this an opportunity to send a message to recruits where, Napier's getting Florida's hat in the ring for some of these big time recruits where Florida has not been involved in as many of these races as they seem to be with Napier, and that we hope they're going to be in the next few years. And Florida, Georgia are definitely going to be going head to head for a lot of prospects. How much of a motivating factor is it going to be for Kirby on Saturday to sit there and say, hey, I want to show the distance between our programs right now just to send a message to this year's group of guys?
I mean, I don't know, just 49-14. Is that really any different than 56-14? Nobody's going to perceive it as any different. I mean, now, again, I'm not predicting that being the score, but I'm saying, is it going to be any different? And Kirby Smart doesn't have to prove anything to anybody when it comes to recruiting. I think at the end of the day, he's proven that you can get elite recruits to come to Georgia. He's proven he can do that. So he may have some things to prove, but that's not one of the things he needs to prove. Billy Napier still needs to prove that. I think you always want to put your foot on your rival's throat. I mean, look, Georgia is enjoying the fact that they can lord the superiority that they have right now over Florida. No Georgia fan is going to be thrilled if Kirby Smart goes, well, I like Billy Napier, so I'm going to lay off. They're like, no, finish him like Mortal Kombat style, like crush them and crush their hopes. So from the standpoint of earning, he's far more concerned, I would suspect, about pleasing the fan base than he is about going easy on his friends in the industry. And quite honestly, nobody does that. Once you get to this level,
yeah,
you don't become the head coach at Georgia by being like, well, I'm going to go easy and I'm going to feel sorry on this guy. It's like the politicians, you get into a debate and the guy starts struggling and you go, oh, he's struggling, I'm going to give him an olive branch. Like, no, I'm going to drop that guy. And,
but you got a chance to throw on an extra TD late. You probably should go ahead and do it, right?
I mean, maybe. I think it depends. I think it depends on the circumstances, right? Like, there is honor in taking a knee. If there's 45 seconds left and he runs the damn ball, and at the end of the game, you're setting yourself up from a situation of now Napier has motivation that do you necessarily want to give him, and do you necessarily want to have that be the narrative coming into next year? You think about Mark Richt, right? Having those idiots come out and dance in 2007, and all of a sudden Urban Meyer remembers that, right? And that is replaying, I guarantee you, in the locker room, in the weight room, during the off season, but also before the Florida Georgia game that week. And you think about it, was funny that SEC thing that they have on the SEC network that goes over the decades. They talked to Greg McElroy about the Florida defense and when they got into the 2009 championship, and he basically was like, "Yeah, that was our scout defense all year long." Like he knew, like Saban knew who we needed to take on that game, and so I didn't even have to study tape that or film that week. I'd been playing it all season long on the scout team for Alabama. So why give Napier that motivation, right? To put something like that in place to go after you specifically. I don't know why you'd want to put a target on your back any more than the target of you are the elite of the elite. But look, I mean, Florida fans are going to have targets on Tennessee's back next year, Kentucky's back next year, hopefully not Florida State, but there are going to be games where we look at LSU's back. There are going to be games where Florida fans look at and say, we want to get that one. We're always going to say that about Georgia, but why make that the absolute number one priority for your opponent? So I think it depends. If there's 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter and you're still playing the game, you got your backup quarterback in and Florida can't stop you. I mean, yeah, he's going to do that, right? But I don't think he's going to start chucking the ball up with 4 minutes to go just to put up a touchdown, because I don't think that makes sense from the standpoint of what he's trying to build and what he's trying to do.
Yeah, and Georgia's got that established brand, so you're right. An extra touchdown too doesn't matter, but maybe you just might want to send a message just to remind some folks. I don't know, but we'll see how that plays out.
Well, how come you don't ask this the other way? Like, what is Napier going to put up the 50 if he's got an opportunity?
Oh hell yeah, you better. Orange and blue, man. I already know.
I
don't know. I'm speaking from a place of dread a little bit, Will. I'm not entirely. I've watched this defense too much this year. We're gonna have to. I normally I want to sell a little more optimism than what I'm selling tonight, but I'm kind of hunkered down for the storm here.
Don't worry, everybody who's watching this show's watched our defense too. They're right with you, Nick.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to 6 bits. Josh Braun has announced he has transferred the offensive lineman. Said in a statement this week, "I apologize to my teammates for the timing of this announcement and departure, but I must do what is in the best interest of myself and my family. I have cherished every second that I've been a Gator, and I look forward to the next chapter of my life." Josh Braun came here out of signed with Florida out of Live Oak, Swanee, and Billy Napier wished Braun well last week. Ended up saying, "Interesting decision relative to being right in the middle of the season." Napier said, "A lot of things going on there relative to big picture for him personally with his wife, his degree, certainly his role on the team. Josh has been a class act. Wants more of a role. We've got nothing but respect for Josh and certainly will help him going forward in any way possible." Bring this up, Will. We saw Braun was a key piece of the offensive line at times last year. Hasn't seen the field a whole lot this year. I would say overall, with this name entering the transfer portal, Will, and you're kind of getting into transfer season, the fact that we're heading into year 2 of the Billy Napier era, do you expect the transfer portal to, maybe fill up a little bit as Napier works to turn over this roster?
I mean, based on what we've seen on the defensive side of the ball, especially, I think we would expect to see that. There is, look, there's no doubt that there's going to need to be some turnover. There's no doubt that there's going to be guys graduating, obviously, but then there's going to be guys who look and say, I can get more playing time someplace else. And that's what the transfer portal's for. And these guys didn't commit to Billy Napier. They committed to Dan Mullen, and they decided that when Mullen was fired, that this was their best opportunity for this year. But under no circumstances is Napier under any illusions that they committed for the next 3 years with him. So there are going to be guys who've gotten buried on the depth chart. You think a guy like Corey Collier, who came in a couple of years ago, hasn't really seen the field, has seen guys jump over him in terms of, like Kamari Wilson jump over him at the safety position. And again, I have no inside information here, but those sorts of players who are on the depth chart who've gotten jumped by guys who Napier's brought in already. Yeah, those guys are going to look for other places. And you think about what's happened on the offensive line. I mean, obviously you get Osiris Torrance coming in, takes that guard spot. Braun, I think, sort of felt like he was next in line for that. He hasn't played that much. I think Richie Leonard's played in that guard spot, even when Torrance has been hurt. Ethan White was hurt a little bit. I think, again, Leonard was in there as well. Tarquin gets hurt on the outside. You've got Barber out there at tackle. So, look, I mean, Napier talked about being comfortable with 8 or 9 offensive linemen coming into the year. Braun was one of those guys, but he hasn't been the first guy off the bench when they've had an injury or when they've had a need to bring in somebody else to back somebody up. Now, obviously, I think that's a good thing that the organization is looking at performance on the field and saying we're going to put people out there, not guys who necessarily have experience. We're going to put the guys who are playing the best. But that's going to mean that you're going to have guys who get jump transfer. And I think that's a legitimate thing. So you sit there and you say, hey, look, if you're not getting playing time here, if you're going to be the fourth string guard or the third string guard, I understand why you'd want to go someplace else. Like Napier said, the timing's a little bit weird. Like, I'm not sure that like transferring someplace else doesn't really get you a whole lot unless you transfer into a program, and I guess you can practice with a team until next year. But I don't know what you necessarily accomplish by transferring now. Any classes you were in, you're going to finish, coming up in December. And so that seems to me to be the logical time to transfer. I would expect to see a lot of guys transfer like before the bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a logical time to maybe leave and do stuff that way. But look, I mean, everybody's got to do what's best for them. The coaches do that, right? I mean, if somebody offered Billy Napier a job in the NFL that he really wanted for 3 times the pay that he's making right now, he'd go, all right, yeah, I'm doing it. And he'd do it in October and wouldn't give it a second thought. And, schools are firing coaches right now. And, Scott Frost was fired in September, for God's sake. So, there's not a whole lot of loyalty when it comes to college football. I don't know why we should expect that from the players. So, look, we wish Josh Braun well. Hopefully he does a good job wherever he goes next. And, it's one of those things where I think, hopefully we support people who've been Gators. You've always been a Gator. Come back when you're done, and hopefully you find the playing time you're looking for and eventually end up playing in the league.
I do like Napier, obviously a fiery personality on the field. I enjoyed seeing him mic'd up before the LSU game too. Just get to see a different side of him because he's so cool and composed off the field, particularly in front of a microphone. I feel like Billy Napier saying interesting decision relative to being right in the middle of the season is about as close to I'm a man, I'm 40 that we're going to get out of Billy ever in front of a microphone. Will.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a little bit feisty this week. Like there were some reporters asking him in his Monday press conference about what he needed to do to improve the defense or what kind of changes he was going to make, and he was sort of like, "Why don't you tell me? You're writing about it." And I'm sitting there going, "Well, I mean, all right, we're starting to see that side of Napier, and hey, when you're 4-3 and you're coming off a bye week and your defense is getting torched, I guess you're a little bit sensitive about it." So, to be honest, it's kind of a good thing because his press conference has been so boring up until this point that a little bit of fire, not a bad thing. I kind of enjoyed it. So, look, I expect him to wish a guy like Braun well, but I also expect him to be disappointed when somebody bails in the middle of the season. There's an expectation when you're roster building that you bring somebody in, even if he's the second or third person off the bench, that you've got that person there, and now you got to figure out who that person is who's not Braun, and you got to start developing that person. You got to start making sure they get reps and all those sorts of things. So just from a frustration standpoint and from a, hey, here's a distraction I didn't need while I was trying to figure out how to get guys to cover Brock Bowers. Now I got to figure out what am I doing if a couple of offensive linemen go down because this person was at some point in that rotation. And, look, I get that it's frustrating, but again, that's the world we live in. And, we'll Napier will deal with it because at some point he's going to go get somebody in the transfer portal who leaves his program early as well.
I know this team's sitting at 4-3, and I know that's not something that will put a smile on a lot of Gator fans' faces here heading into the Georgia week. But you look at what's going on around the country, and you look at other situations. Mario Cristobal in Miami just lost to Duke this week. You got
8 turnovers, buddy. 8 turnovers.
And they didn't just lose. They got smoked at home by Duke. And that's not even their worst home loss because they got smoked by Middle Tennessee State in the early part of the season here. That just reeks of a team that's quitting on the field, Will, to get smoked by those teams. Because you talk about, and we've had this conversation too with Florida where people talk about lack of talent. The one thing you got to give Napier and this staff credit for. And I know the defense has been frustrating as hell for all of us here, but this team has been, he talks about it all the time in the pregame and halftime interviews where this team has fight. We've seen that this year. That is one area where this team has significantly improved this year is there has not been a whiff of a team that's quitting on Napier or the staff or guys checking out the transfer. You see the story too, come out today with the Texas A&M players where 3 of those 8 5-star kids are getting suspended because they allegedly had a little smoke session there before they went on the field in South Carolina. this week. So Jimbo and A&M's unraveling, and off the field's not looking great. And the Miami thing, Mario's starting to call out the players a little bit. There might be a huge exodus to the transfer portal there to clear some roster space. But I got to tell you, you're not seeing that to that degree with this Florida team so far in the season. So that is one area that you can point out that has been a real positive so far the first half of the year, Will.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we knew there were going to be growing pains. We didn't expect this team to win a national championship. I think the Utah win in many ways sort of made you always think about like people get frustrated when expectations don't meet reality. And expectations after, I think people went into that Utah game going, this might be tough. And then you win the Utah game and Anthony Richardson comes out looking like a Heisman level quarterback. And then the Kentucky game happens and it's just this giant thud, right? And then the Tennessee game comes and you're like, oh, well, okay, maybe. And that game against LSU was an opportunity to get to 5-2, go into the Georgia game, a lot of momentum, a lot of good vibes. It's a home game against LSU. LSU hadn't been real good, especially on offense all year long, and they just torched them. And so I think heading into the bye week, it's such a different narrative if Florida's 5-2, even if they win that game by a field goal, even if the defense is getting torched. If Anthony Richardson led them back and they had won that game, the narrative is very, very different. And the thing again, I think, you can say something about like Dan Lanning out in Oregon. He's having a good year. You can talk about a lot of different guys who've gone to different places and have succeeded. Brian Kelly, you can talk about at LSU having a better record than Napier, certainly, and seeing progress there on the offensive side of the ball. And look at those and go, okay, well, there's the counter example to the examples you've already given. To me, the more important thing is I wrote an article this week. It's actually been pretty popular about Saban, Smart, and Napier. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is that in Saban's first year, he goes 7-6, obviously has the loss to Louisiana Monroe. He went 4-6 in one-score games. So they had 10 of his 13 games were one-score games. You look at Smart in 2016, they go 8-5, but he was 6-3 in one-score games. So 9 of his 13 games were one-score games. Napier, 3-1 in one-score games this year, but 7 total games. So actually a little bit less, but 2 of those other games have been 10-point games, really close where the team's been in it. The theme there is that they are in the games. They're just not necessarily always getting the job done. You then look at Saban in 2008. He went 3-0 in one-score games, but he went 7-0 in blowout games, which I'm defining as 20 plus points. Kirby Smart went 2-1 in one-score games the next year, but he went 10-1 in blowouts. They got blown out by Auburn or LSU, I think, in that year. But the point is there's 7 blowouts for Saban, 10 blowouts for Smart, and they had 2 total combined in their first years. And so what you saw was a jump from, hey, we're close, we're right on the precipice, to now we're beating the crap out of everybody that we play. And you saw that transition from year 1 to year 2. So there's a lot of frustration, I think, with Napier and Tony and not being able to get the job done. But I don't necessarily think that it's a marker of the program to be 3-1, to be playing close games over and over and over again. The interesting thing is if you look at Jim McClain, 6 close games his first year, 2 close games the next year, but only 4 blowouts. Dan Mullen, 3 close games in his first year, 4 close games in his second year, and only 5 blowouts. So they didn't make that leap to the second year where they were absolutely dominant. They won a bunch of close games again in those second years, and then sort of, in McElwain's case, sort of coasted to the SEC championship game, but they weren't doing it in dominant fashion. So when people ask me, or if anybody asks me, what am I looking for from a development standpoint for Napier? It's really not about this year. To me, it's about next year. Do you start to put together those blowout wins against the teams like Missouri, against the teams like Kentucky potentially? And all of a sudden, those games that were one-score games that might have gone either way are now going your way consistently in a big way. That is clearly an indicator of a team that has bought into the coach. And it's clearly, I think, a harbinger of things to come. So, look, we won't know that this year, right? We'll be talking about it during the offseason, talking about what's coming. But if Mario Cristobal plays the problem with Cristobal is he's not playing a bunch of close games, right? They're getting blown out of the water by these teams. If Florida was getting blown out of the water by Duke and Middle Tennessee State and those sorts of things, I'd be like, this is a problem. Florida's not doing that, right? Even the game against USF, it's a win. It's a field goal game, right? The game against Kentucky was 10 points, but only because Florida basically gave them 3 at the end because they went for it on 4th down. You could argue maybe the Tennessee game is a little bit more than a one-score game because they got a little bit lucky in terms of being able to get those touchdowns at the end. But all in all, I think the profile for Napier looks promising. But again, that profile means nothing unless you're able to take advantage of it next year and bring in high level recruits to supplement the guys you brought in last year, to supplement the guys from 2020 who or from the 2021 class who you're building into right now. And, we're not going to know that for a while, but certainly we're going to talk about recruiting a little bit, and things are on the upswing there.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Will, because we'll move on here to a dollar. We'll talk about the number one player in the state of Florida here, Cormani McClain. We've talked about him a bunch on this show. 5-star Lakeland corner, not just the number one player in this state, but ranked top 5 nationally by 24/7 Sports. From Andrew Ivins of 24/7 Sports, describes him as a new age cornerback prospect that has a chance to be a difference maker at football's highest levels, given his rare blend of size, length, and speed. Started prep career off playing primarily wide receiver before being thrown into action on the defensive side of the ball. What would Cormani McClain's commitment here, a 5-star prospect, mean for Billy Napier and the Florida Gators?
I mean, it would mean that Napier can close on the guy he has to close on. So, one of the things coming out of last year's transition class when Harold Perkins decided to go to LSU, when Jacoby Matthews decided to stay home as well, was that it wasn't that Napier didn't get those guys here and that said definitively he couldn't be an elite recruiter. It's that he didn't get them here, and so that meant it was an open question as to whether he could be an elite recruiter. Cormani McClain has been the number one target on Florida's board ever since Billy Napier got here for this particular class. He's from Lakeland. He's from around. Every crystal ball has gone Florida's way so far in terms of people predicting. All the intel that people have, that I've heard at least, is that he's coming to Florida. Whether or not that ends up happening or not, that's a reflection on Napier. This is a guy who, if they miss, it is an enormous miss. And you can't miss on guys like this who are in your backyard, who have been your number one priority. You miss on guys like that, you can't build programs missing on guys like that. And so what it means is that you have, if you bring him in, it means you've proven that you can prioritize people, that you can prioritize these players, that you can start to lock down the state. You start looking at all the guys they've got in the top 300, a whole bunch of them are from Florida. And we've talked about Florida being leaky over the past 5, 6, 7 years. It's still a little bit leaky, but he's starting to secure it in a way that certainly Florida State is not. And so to me, he is an absolute must-have for this recruiting class. And he really changes the numbers in a way that makes this class look very much, or at least starting to look more similar to the bump classes of Alabama and Georgia, as opposed to the bump classes of Mullen and McElwain.
Yeah, you're looking at a guy that's definitely been circled from day one on that board, as to say that's a guy that kind of a good weather vane there for what the program's doing. You mentioned Florida being leaky and in the past year, and one guy that we did lose out on initially to an in-state rival here at Florida State was Roderick Kearney, offensive lineman from Orange Park High School up there in Jacksonville. 2023 prospect here, according to SI Gators. Florida has pitched Kearney the ability to play any of the 5 offensive line positions should he sign with the Gators, and that is now his intention. Will, this was a prospect that in the summer a lot was made of his commitment to Florida State, because it was alleged that he committed right after, within hours after visiting the University of Florida campus. But give credit to Sale and Stapleton. They stayed on top of this recruitment. And look, at the end of the day, too, all these commitments right now, they're just commitments until the papers are signed in December. So keep that in mind. Just because someone's committed to us doesn't mean it's a done deal either. So Kearney, big time flip from Florida State there, along the offensive line, too, where we definitely need the help.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big thing, is that he's the 3rd offensive lineman now, but he's the only top 300 prospect. He's ranked like 130th overall, 123rd, I think. So a big time prospect, probably going to slide inside the guard. Think of him more as Osiris Torrance than Martez Ivy, maybe, but he's the highest ranked player Florida signed on the offensive line since Ivy. So, that's a significant time frame to have not brought in top 100 guys. And he's not quite there in terms of the top 100, but he's pretty close. And so I think you can start looking at that and say, okay, like, this is a guy that we can start building around. You think about him, you got Najee Harris, also as an interior offensive lineman, ranked 425 overall. You've got Bryce Lovett, offensive tackle, ranked 635 overall. If they can bring in one more guy who's in that top 100, there's one particularly, Okunlula out of Massachusetts, who's a high 5-star guy. They bring in somebody like that, then you say it's a home run with an offensive line class. I think you need 4. I think that you're going to see him sign one more. I think, you mentioned, or we talked earlier about guys leaving for the transfer portal. One of the reasons that you don't mind too much if people leave for the transfer portal is you can all of a sudden sign more guys. The way the initial counters work now at the portal is very, very different than it has in the past. And so you can sign 28, 29, 30 guys, depending upon how many people leave through the transfer portal. And there may be an opportunity then to fill out the offensive side of the recruiting ball or the recruiting here, because the defensive recruiting, especially if you have McClain in the fold, is awesome. With McClain in the fold, the average ranking of the 12 defensive players is 181st overall in the country. 93.34 24/7 sports rating. That's getting in that Alabama Georgia range in terms of the quality of recruit on the defensive side of the ball. Offense, there's only 10 commits right now. 352 is the overall national ranking, 90.92. That's a Dan Mullen range recruiting class on the offensive side of the ball. And that's with Kearney in the fold. So they have some work to do in terms of elite prospects on the offensive side of the ball. I think they've clearly focused and prioritized the defensive side of the ball. And given what we've seen this year, I think that was probably a wise choice. I think we sort of expect, and I think one of the things that NIL gives you an opportunity to do in things like this is give that sort of focus, because if Anthony Richardson comes back next year, then you're not rebuilding with a brand new quarterback trying to figure out what you do on the offensive side of the ball while breaking in a bunch of true freshmen. You bring in guys like Kelby Collins, like Dijon Johnson, like Cormani McClain, pair them up with Jason Marshall, Kamari Wilson, and now all of a sudden you've got a youth movement, but it's not necessarily a group of players that you have to be locked down. They just have to be better than they've been this year, and you can still have a pretty successful season. So, I'm excited about where this is going. Obviously, I think McClain's commitment is critical. I've expressed that. I think the other thing is there are other 5-stars on the board that I'm not sure we thought were on the board a while back. You think about Keon Keeley, you think about Quarasa. There are some opportunities there maybe to bring in another 5-star guy who's going to be able to make an impact right away. And you think about sort of where Florida has struggled: defensive line, linebacker, and cornerback. The linebacker, not so much in this recruiting class, but I think we expect Shamar James to step up. Jaden Robinson, obviously the flip from South Carolina, is the linebacker that you sort of look at and say, hey, we're going to need to get some stuff from him next year. But you think about Isaiah Nixon at the edge. You got Norman Searcy, Cameron James, and Kelby Collins defensive line. You got McClain, hopefully Dijon Johnson, Jakeem Jackson, Jordan Castell, and Sharif Denson there at defensive back. This is what we talk about when we talk about recruiting, and that it's a lottery ticket, and that it may be that Sharif Denson ends up being the best corner out of everybody on the board. I doubt it, because I think McClain's a can't miss guy. But let's say Jordan Castell, ranked 209th overall, becomes the best safety that they end up signing here. The fact that you have Dijon Johnson and Jordan Castell in this class means that you have 2 opportunities to get a guy who's going to be an elite safety. And Florida hasn't had that a lot in the past. It's been one of those things where you've had to rely on Rashad Torrance turning out. You've had to rely on Trevez Johnson turning out. And when those guys struggle, there just isn't anybody else there to jump in and push them, both from a competitive standpoint, but also to pick up the slack if they're injured, if they're nicked, if they're struggling, those sorts of things.
Stacked secondary class for sure, coming in on that 2023 recruiting class there. Could be added to with the addition of Cormani McClain. Another bit of news from the secondary in the class of 2023: Desmond Ricks, cornerback from IMG Composite, 5-star prospect, was a part of the 2024 class, has decided to reclassify and enter into college next year in the class of 2023. I know this is a guy that Florida has been in on down at IMG, but with the addition of McClain, you referenced some of those other names, and we saw Johnson just commit recently as well. Are we really expected to be a serious player in the Ricks commitment, particularly considering the fact that he's reclassifying to the class of 2023, which seems like he has intentions on making a move? It seems like he made that with his specific move in mind.
Yeah, I mean Napier was actually asked about this, or they can't ask him about specific prospects, but they asked him about reclassifying, and he basically said that he had to declassify. His dad held him back when he was like 8th or 9th grade because he needed to get bigger. He's going to gain 50 pounds. Basically, his point was is that it takes a special kind of player to reclassify and really be a difference maker, and Ricks really does fit that bill. But even then, he's not McClain. Like 15th overall on the 24/7 Sports composite, there's much more variation in terms of where he is. In fact, 24/7 Sports has him as a 4-star. They have him as the 33rd ranked overall prospect in the country, which is still a very, very good player, but not a can't miss player like a guy like McClain, who's pretty much consensus top 5. Everybody looks at him and says first round pick. You look at 24/7's evaluation of Ricks, they've got him listed as a second to third round projection, which means you've got a guy who's going to need to develop a little bit. He's not going to be a, hey, he comes in and he contributes day one, most likely. But obviously, you look at a guy like that, Alabama, Florida, LSU, Miami, and Oklahoma is his list. I think Florida's going to get a look. He's at IMG, right? He's at IMG. He knows Kamari Wilson. He knows Will Norman. He knows those guys. And so I think Napier's going to get a hearing. I think it's going to be rough. I think you look at the defensive back class that Florida already has and say, you're not going to say no to a guy like Ricks, right? But does he look at the defensive back class and say, I'd like to go someplace else? But again, he's also looking at Alabama, right? And you look at what Alabama's had on the field at defensive back for the last decade, and you'd go, if you're afraid of competition, you're not going to Alabama. But I think this really does come down to, I think Alabama and LSU are probably in the lead with Florida a little bit behind. But, again, it's the reclassification came with a purpose. So he already knows where he's going. And if Florida probably already knows where he's going at this point as well. And that means that if he's coming to be a Gator, they've already given him assurances that he's going to get an opportunity and even with the defensive backs they have coming in.
So big day Thursday with the announcement of Cormani McClain, Florida, Georgia on Saturday. Obviously, big week for the Gators here. Will, any final thoughts before we head out?
I mean, just enjoy it. The cocktail party is a special thing. I had somebody ask me earlier today, well, again, because Kirby Smart's making noise again about doing a home and home and all that crap. And it's like, you know what? This is a special game in many ways because it's in Jacksonville. Like you go up to Athens and those weirdos bark at you, and it's like, okay, that'd be kind of fun. You go to Gainesville, it's a game day experience because it's Georgia. Game day experiences are special, but it's a similar game day experience to the ones you'd get against LSU or Alabama or Tennessee or any big time rival who's coming into the swamp. This is different, right? The Jacksonville game is different, and I like that aspect of it. And so, I think it's going to stay there because despite whatever noise anybody makes, there's a lot of money at stake for these two programs. I think they'll probably make some concessions in terms of being able to have guys there who they're recruiting, having official visits, those sorts of things. But enjoy it while it's here, because if anything, college football has shown us over the last year or two that the traditions and the things that drive the sport are not always congruent, right? I mean, the fact that Oklahoma and Texas are coming into the SEC in a couple of years, the fact they're expanding the playoff, all that sort of stuff. Florida, Georgia is a huge tradition thing, but obviously there's a lot of noise around it. So you never know when it's going to be the last one. So enjoy it. And hopefully we get those 3 turnovers. Anthony Richardson turns in a gem, and we are ruining the run to the championship that Georgia hopes to have.
Kirby Smart's argument about Jacksonville isn't congruent because they keep booking neutral site games in Charlotte and Atlanta. And I think I've laid that out about 100 times, but I did see Kirby kind of push back on that narrative this week. Is he said, look, I give you guys an honest answer, but I only talk about it when you ask me, to the media. So he's like, I'm not just randomly campaigning on this issue. You guys ask a question, I answer the question. I'm like, all right, I'll at least give him credit on that. So I
mean, I don't need the answer from Kirby Smart. I know what answer he's going to give. Somebody needs to ask him about his haircut. Like, that's the only thing I want a reporter to ask Kirby Smart about, because you win a national championship, you make $10 million a year. Why is your grandma still cutting your hair? Come on, buddy. Like, go find a barber and let's get this going. Like, I usually won't pick on people for their looks, but in this case, that's all I've got. So
yeah, I think Billy Napier's got an extra set of clippers or something, right?
That'd be great if Kirby showed up with the that's the bet those two have is if Napier wins the game, he should have to
trying to think about how many $1 million haircuts there are with SEC head coaches. That's
well, Drinkwitz certainly isn't spending his money on haircuts. Billy just has his wife do it. Got the clippers at home.
Beaver's all right. Beaver's got a good thing going there.
Yeah,
that's not bad.
Harson has to go to the barber to figure out which guy's trying to knife him in the back. So he needs the
Harson doesn't trust anybody in Auburn with sharp objects. He probably has his wife cut the hair in the garage because nobody in Auburn's allowed to touch that guy. That's a marriage that's going to be running out here real soon there.
Yeah.
I have to imagine.
Leach, I'm not sure he cuts his hair. It's just sort of,
Leach definitely goes to Great Clips. 100%.
No doubt. What about Heupel? What's Heupel do?
I don't know, man. I could see a lot of different things with Heupel. It's a lot of different scenarios there. I'm not sure. Maybe are we 100% sure? Was Heupel going bald?
No, so. I don't think so. I think he's. It's just. Put it this way: I'm someone who carries a few extra pounds. It's very difficult to find a hairstyle that actually is complementary to that sort of thing. So it's just tough. But anyway, hey, we need the fans who watch the show because we're just riffing here. We didn't plan this. So you tell us who you think the barber is for all the SEC head coaches, and because I find it interesting and entertaining, even if nobody else does.
That's good. All right. Hey, Florida Georgia week. It's still exciting. Despite the impending doom, I'm still excited about it. Looking forward to seeing how this team measures up because it's certainly the team we are going to be chasing here in the SEC East in the near future with Billy Napier. So looking forward to that game on Saturday up in Jacksonville. Enjoy the game, everybody, and go Gators. Thank you for watching this episode of Stand Up and Holler. Be sure to subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel, join our Patreon community at Read and Reaction for bonus content each week, and check out our website at readandreaction.com. I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles, and as always, go Gators.